Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Winning Drive podcast. I'm Reeta Hubbard, the NFL chick, co-host of the Glenn and Reeta Show on 105.7 The Fan. Of course, I'm here with my guy, Cordell Woodland from Shaking It Up Sports and the Ravens reporter for 105.7 The Fan. Ravens head to Jacksonville on Sunday night to play the Jaguars, who are trying to get their bearings in a row as well, as they've lost a couple of games and they've dealt with their injuries and all of these other things that have happened. Very interesting, Cordell, how the Ravens, um, I'm not superstitious, but I'm cautiously optimistic to say this, have been relatively healthy down the stretch. Meanwhile, other teams have been struggling in terms of their health situation.
Yeah, I mean, I asked Harbs about that on Wednesday, just, his feeling or his thought process considering where the team has been this time of the year, the last couple of years, injury wise, to look around the league and see how everybody else is kind of dealing with the injury bug, and the Ravens find themselves to be one of the healthier teams in the league. That doesn't mean that they're not, still dealing with injuries. Obviously, there are guys on this team playing through injuries, but when you see them in December having practices where they have all 53 guys on the field, that has to make you feel good right now.
I completely agree. So again, they go to Jacksonville to play the Jaguars, who are currently sitting at 8-5, 2 games behind in terms of the seeding situation. They are currently the 4th seed in the AFC. Let's start with the Ravens offense against the Jaguars defense. This is a defense that once again has another really good pass rusher and Josh Allen. Not that Josh Allen. If you don't know this defensive Josh Allen, and you need to kind of watch some highlights. This guy is the real deal. He's a very good football player, and you know how I feel about this Ravens offense in terms of neutralizing pass rushes. I thought that they did a really good job with Aaron Donald for the most part in the Rams game, and so now you go into Jacksonville. And look, Aaron Donald to me is generational. Josh Allen, I think, is a fantastic football player. Trey Walker hasn't really been the guy that I think that they thought that he was kind of like away in terms of like they drafted him based on potential. And as of yet, he has not lived up to the potential of what the Jags thought that he would be. So now you got the Ravens coming in this weekend, who I still am not really sure what it is they want to do. I think that the Ravens offense just be on vibes. I mean, you can say that about anybody. You can really say this about any team, right? And that you go by the feel of the game. But in terms of like what it is that they want to do, they'll run and then not get with the flow of the run. They'll pass but not get with the flow of the pass. They just be out there vibing. But somehow, some way, it ends up working. The last 5 of 6 games, they've scored 30 points or more. So I guess we can't complain there. Although you already know my issue has been they got to get better with the offensive line moving down the stretch. One thing we did notice in the Rams game was the rotation of the left tackle situation between Ronnie Stanley and Patrick McCarry. How did you feel about that, Cordell?
I was okay with it. And I mean, and really both of the tackles, Morgan Moses and Faalele were in rotation as
Yes, this
well.
is true.
I think that's the way that they're going to have to kind of play it with those two guys, both veterans, both playing through injuries right now. I don't know how long it'll go. I don't know if they'll go into the postseason continuing to do that. I would imagine that they'll probably let those guys ride it out at that point, but we'll see. But Harb said, it was the offensive line coach Joe D's idea, and the players were on board with it. And, I think kind of like what we've talked about with some of these defensive guys like Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy and those guys, like less is more for some guys. You're able to keep them fresh. And John Harbaugh said that was a big part of their thinking with that tackle rotation, was that they wanted those guys to be fresh for the fourth quarter, which they were. You think back to that fourth quarter on Sunday, quite a few plays where Lamar Jackson is sitting back there eating his lunch, surveying the field, and taking his sweet time deciding on what he's going to do with the football. So I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to keep that going.
I completely agree. So we seen the emergence I don't want to say emergence. That's not the right word that I want to use, but we've seen guys like Odell. We've seeing guys like Zay, even guys like Nelson Aguilar, where the statistics don't really show out, but his leadership plays a big role into what it is that they've been doing lately. Really come to form at the end of that Rams game, and then they go to Jacksonville, who we talked prior to the starting. Their DVOA on defense, I believe, was eighth, if I'm not mistaken. It is. And you were like, I don't really like that. I feel some type of way. It ain't, that's more precedented or what they were doing earlier in the season, not later in the season. So explain why you feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, especially at home. First of all, Jacksonville is not a good team at home this year. I know they have a losing record at home. And right now they're going up against the Ravens offense that's hot. You mentioned it. They've scored over 30 points in 5 of their last 6 games. Well, the Jacksonville Jaguars have given up 30 plus in 3 of their last 5 games. So that right there probably isn't a good
including the Bengals in overtime.
Exactly.
We didn't forget.
Backup quarterbacks. I mean, you look at some of these offenses, you got Joe Flacco, who just tore them up for 31 points this past Sunday as well. And definitely can't forget what the Niners did to them a few weeks back, 34-3 at home in Jacksonville as well. So I like this matchup between the Ravens and the Jaguars, at least when you look at the Ravens offense against the Jags defense. You mentioned Josh Allen. He's a legit threat. 13 and a half sacks on the season is no fluke. He's not just stumbling into 13 and a half sacks. The dude's legit. But you feel good about, we just mentioned the rotation that they have on the outsides now. I would imagine that they're going to continue to do that Sunday night, keep those guys fresh, because Josh Allen has one of the best motors in the league. He's strong. He's got a great swim move. He just knows how to shed blockers very quick and get to the quarterback. I think that the Ravens are going to still try to push the ball down the field. I think they're going to throw the ball quite a bit in this game against Jacksonville. I think that they're going to be the Ravens offense that we've been seeing. You talked about it. You don't really know almost what their identity is at this point still. And the same can be said for Jacksonville's offense as well. You don't really know what their identity is at this point. But for the Ravens, I always go back to Todd Monken's introductory press conference when he was talking about, what balance means to him. And balance to him is being able to throw the ball when you want and being able to run the ball when you want. And I think that's kind of how the Ravens are going to operate. I think they want the ball in Lamar Jackson's hands. So whether that means him throwing the ball 40 plus times or taking off and running close to 15 times, that's what they want. They're going to live and die by Lamar Jackson. And Lamar's looking pretty good these days. So I think that they're going to go out there and try to stretch the field. I think that they're going to try to hit on some deep shots. This isn't a Jacksonville secondary that scares you. I think as long as Lamar can get time, he'll be able to kind of pick that defense apart.
And Lamar said, in the post game from Sunday, I saw guys getting open and I got a little bit excited, I guess, leading regarding to the missed opportunities down the field when he was throwing the deep ball. So you got to assume that, hopefully he can calm down just a little bit so he can get the opportunities of connecting. I understand 3 of the longest passes in last week's game came from Ravens. I understand, but we also can recognize that there were some throws downfield that were missed. And look, it happens, right? So ultimately, you hope that Lamar, doesn't get as giddy this week when he sees somebody that's wide open, because it's possible that you might find the same situation. And just take your time. Don't get too excited. Just let your progressions flow, and hopefully you guys can make some connections moving down the field.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I saw a tweet today, and I guess it had a kind of a screenshot from an article. Not sure who wrote the article. Can't even remember who posted the tweet. I saw it in passing, but it had a description of, I guess, one of the MVP voters' thoughts on Lamar. And I think at the start of the season, the MVP voter had Lamar in the tier 3 category. And he said right now he has him in the tier 2 category. Okay. But what he said was, Lamar is going to miss on throws. He has his moments where he's going to miss on throws. But on the back end, he more than makes up with it with the throws that he does end up making, and
I
then
agree with that.
obviously the plays that he makes with his legs. So yeah, he may not hit on every deep ball, he may not hit every open wide receiver, but throughout the course of that 60-minute game, Lamar Jackson is going to make so many spectacular plays that it, in the end, I think it will end up overriding the negative plays that he may have had earlier.
I completely agree with that. So I do think that this is an opportunity for the Ravens offense to make some big plays. Do you think we see Gus more? Because it feels like we're seeing Gus less and less these
I
days.
continue to say it's a game flow situation. Even as less, look, it's not like we're seeing less of Gus and more of Keaton Mitchell. You're really getting all three of these backs. Justice Hill got quite a bit of run on Sunday against the Rams. So,
And that's because Justice Hill is a better pass blocker, I
I think
think,
it's
than
that.
Keaton Mitchell. That I
Right.
think that because people keep asking questions, oh, why is Justice Hill? You know why? Because Justice Hill is better at pass blocking right now on this point, and allowing Keaton Mitchell to just simply run the football the way that he should. Once Keaton Mitchell, I think, masters the understanding of what his assignment is from a pass blocking perspective, I think you'll see Keaton more. But until then, Justice Hill is not going to be out of this rotation,
No,
whether
he's
you
not.
like it or not.
Yeah, he's a part of it, and look, I seen, and I do think that's a part of it. I do think that's a part of why Keaton isn't getting the run that everybody thinks that he should get. And I'll give Keaton some credit. I mean, I saw him make a couple of nice blocks in pass pro back there, flipping a couple of guys. Lamar gave him a shout out at the podium on Wednesday about that as well. But there's something about Justice Hill that they obviously like. It's the fact that they trust him. I think the trust factor of Justice Hill is major. They know that they can put him out there and he knows his assignment and he's going to do it to the best of his ability. But this is why when Keaton Mitchell initially started to become a thing, I was trying to temper expectations for him, because just like I said, how many times were we talking about J.K. Dobbins needs more carries? Why can't J.K.
Yep.
Dobbins get over 15 carries in a game? Like, Keaton Mitchell has yet to have at least 12 touches in a game. It's not a coincidence. This is how they operate. They want multiple guys in that stable. And I don't know what Keaton has to do to really get the opportunities that everybody wants him to get and that he wants to get. I think that they're just going to continue to go with this committee. And then you got to take into account Lamar using his legs on plays as well. That's taking away carries from other guys.
110%. I agree. I do think, as time goes on, Keaton will, but you still want to get him acclimated and not force them into a situation where you don't have to, because you have other running backs and you have Lamar Jackson when he uses his legs that can help, move the ball down the field on the ground. So I don't think that's necessary.
The good thing about Keaton is that he's efficient. So, he doesn't get a lot of opportunities, but at some point he does make a couple of those opportunities turn into big plays.
Let's flip the script and talk about the Ravens defense against this Jags offense coming back on winning drive. All right, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about this Ravens defense who didn't have the best of weeks, but it's the National Football League, and the Rams and what they do is very well done. And the schemes that the Rams do, luckily for them, they won't see too many other teams running those same type of concepts moving forward. You might be a little bit concerned about the Dolphins game, but let's not cross that bridge until we get to it. The Jaguars are this weekend. And so you have the Ravens defense who apparently, correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle Hamilton did a little bit of practicing yesterday.
Yeah, he did. He was on the practice field. He was a part of all the 53 that was on the practice field with a knee brace, but he's there.
Yeah. And while that doesn't really mean anything, because there's been times we've seen Morgan Moses have full practices and then not play, I would much rather the Ravens in this situation hold out on Kyle Hamilton just to make sure that he's okay. Now, I don't know if they're going to feel that way because Evan Ingram had a pretty decent game, to my understanding, against the Cleveland Browns last week. So you kind of wonder if they are wondering if he's going to be able to be okay to cover Ingram. But nonetheless, there's some injuries that the Jaguars are dealing with. Number one, we obviously know that Sunshine, aka Trevor Lawrence, is dealing with a high ankle sprain. Now, I get why he's still out there, because they only have a 1-game lead against the Houston Texans, and I think that they're pressing at this point. They're trying to make sure that they're winning the division. But I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. Now, I know when you look at the statistics from that game on Sunday, it looks like it was a close game, but it didn't really feel like it was a close game against the Cleveland Browns. And so he just didn't look comfortable. He didn't really look, his throws were kind of weird. And I don't know if that's because he's having planting issues. I'm not really sure. But ultimately, he just didn't really look comfortable. And then when you add to the issues, Christian Kirk has been out and dealing with an injury. I don't think he's going to play on Sunday. He's their number one receiver. Yes, I understand they got Zay Jones. Yes, I understand Calvin Ridley's still there. So they do still have weapons, but ultimately they're missing their big body weapon with Kirk being out on Sunday. So when you look at the injuries, dealing with Kyle Hamilton potentially being out, because we don't know yet, but then dealing with the injury of Trevor Lawrence, more than likely is going to play with that high ankle sprain, and what they're dealing with. How do you think that this bodes in terms of what the Ravens can do? By the way, we saw and I want to bring this up too, Cordell, and I want you to respond as well. The running game for the Rams last week was really well, and then they play Etienne this weekend as well for the Jaguars. So I'm just curious to know your thoughts on how they're going to be able to contain the run, because there has been an Achilles heel for this defense, and how you think they'll fare against these Jaguars wide receiving core and Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean, look, it'll be a challenge. They've got talent over there without question. The loss of Christian Kirk is a big loss to Jacksonville. You could see it just by watching them. It's crazy. Everybody was thinking that Calvin Ridley was going to be the guy this year, and Ridley's been off and on. He's come through it in spots, but Christian Kirk has been there for them all year. He's been consistent every game, and with him now out, Parker Washington comes in. It does put more of the pressure on Calvin Ridley, on Evan Ingram, on Zay Jones, and Travis Etienne out of the backfield as well. Now, one of the issues you mentioned some of the health issues for the Jags. Their left tackle, Walker Little, he missed last week's game. He's on the injury report again this week. He was limited with a hamstring. We'll see if he ends up playing in this game. But if he doesn't, that'll be another huge loss for them as well. When you already have Trevor Lawrence back there dealing with that high ankle sprain, this is a defense that gets after the quarterback as is. Yep. If they're going to be without their left tackle, that's going to be a major problem. You mentioned the run game. Yeah, they're going up against arguably I wouldn't even say arguably, a more talented back in Travis Etienne than Kyren Williams right now. Yes. But I think they'll actually look pretty good in the stopping the run in this game. I say that because number one, the Jags have not been as good running the ball as of late as they were earlier in the year. A lot of Etienne's damage this year was done early on this season. He is definitely cooled off as of late. And I think the issue is when you look at the Ravens' struggles against the run this year, it's been against teams that have made a true commitment to running the football. It's very been, true. Just continuous pounding up against the wall as opposed to teams like the Bengals and stuff who have kind of gone away from the run. I think that's what they're going to face against Jacksonville. Jacksonville relies on home run hitting run plays. So it's not like Etienne is going to be like Kyren Williams was this past Sunday, where he's going to get 25 to 30 touches, 25 to 30 carries in this game. I don't think it'll be that way for him. So as long as the Ravens can limit the big plays, tackle him in space, that'll be good. The problem that happened this past week against the Rams was Kyren Williams is getting to the second level before he gets contact. And by that point, he's got his motor going and he's dragging guys an extra 5 yards a lot of times. So if they can get off, guys are going to have to share their blocks at the front line. Matabike talked about that was one of the big adjustments they made in the second half because in the first half, they were allowing blockers to get up to the second level and get to guys like Roquan and Patrick Queen. They can't do that in this game. The right side of that line for the Jaguars, pretty good. You got former All-Pro Brandon Sheriff. You got Anton Harrison. I like both of those guys. So I am curious to see how the battle in the trenches goes. I don't expect the Ravens to look the way they did this past week against the Rams in this one. I like their chances a lot more. But, yeah, I mean, look, Trevor Lawrence can carve you up. he can beat you. This is they can put up points. But I think if the Ravens can get pressure, which I think they will, I think that will go a long way into A, forcing Trevor Lawrence into turnovers, and B, forcing him to, use his legs more than he wants to. This is an offense that wants to push the ball down the field. They can
Right.
beat you on some of those deep crosses as well, but their scheme isn't the same as the Rams or the Niners or the Dolphins. It's a little different with Doug Peterson likes to do out there. But they definitely want to push the ball down the field. So those corners, Marlon Humphrey, who has had his struggles on some of those down the field passes, they're going to test them. They're going to test them. If they see Calvin Ridley over there or even Zay Jones over there, if it's a one-on-one opportunity, they're going to throw the ball at him. So Marlon's got to be ready to start making a play on some of these passes, because both of those receivers are really good at those jump ball opportunities and those deep down the field contested catches, contested catch chances as well. So limiting the big plays would be a big part of the emphasis for the Ravens, again, just like it was last week.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, look, I think the biggest thing here is a guy behind center is not healthy. You know he's out there playing with a typically an injury that most people would not be playing. He's pulling a Patrick Mahomes here in the playoffs, where he's playing with the high ankle sprain. And look, they're two different guys. We have yet to see if this is going to work out and benefit the Jaguars. But as of right now, since his injury, they are 0-2. And I say 0-2. I understand that he got hurt in the Bengals
Right.
game. And so I'll go and say 0-1, because he did exit the game and then Better came in and played for him. But since he's started after the injury, they've been 0-1. So this is definitely the game where I think you have to put pressure on him. You have to make sure that you make him uncomfortable, that you make him feel like, he has to move around, because that's what you want. You want him to move around on that bum ankle. You know what I'm saying? You want him to get sketchy. You want his feet to be, moving around, because he doesn't know what to do. So while I definitely agree with you that down the field got to handle their assignments, you can't have any missed and blown opportunities the same way that we saw in the Rams game last week. Can't do that. But ultimately, this is a game where I feel like, because you know that you're dealing with an injury with the opposing quarterback, you got to make sure that you stay in his face consistently, and even to the point where you feel like that he is starting to see things. Like, I'm seeing ghosts now because I'm
Right.
scared. Somebody's coming after me, and they're really not coming after me.
Yeah, I mean, look, and this is a dude that just threw 3 interceptions in that game against the Browns. He was sacked 4 times. He did throw the 3 touchdowns as well. Had a season high
Yeah,
50
but one was a
passes.
garbage touchdown
Yeah,
at the end of the game. At that
right.
point, the game was out of reach. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
just
he definitely he wasn't sharp, and by no means was he sharp in that game. And like I said, the Browns did a good job of forcing them to play from behind and kind of get them to abandon the run a little bit. But I do think that this is an offense that relies a lot on the big play, and if you can kind of get them, I don't want to say panicking necessarily, but if you could get them to the point to where they feel like they have to start hunting for the big play, then you got something working. But you got to get them to abandon the run. In 4 of the last 5 games for Travis Etienne, he's had less than 15 carries, and he hasn't had 100 yard. He's only had 100+ yard game this year. That was week 5 against Buffalo. But this is a dude that does damage in the receiving game. He's got at least 4 catches in the last 3 games as well. So just because they're not running the ball, they do use some of that short passing game as a little bit of an extension of the run game for Travis Etienne as well. Patrick Queen has been the one that's kind of tasked with guarding these running backs out of the backfield. So he's going to have to be really good at that open field tackling. That's also in Kyle Hamilton's wheelhouse as well. I think that's the importance of his status for Sunday night. Will he be available to be out there to chase down Travis Etienne if he gets the ball in the open field?
very true. So this is an interesting matchup, because they still have a lot of good skill players. Again, I mentioned Evan Ingram earlier in the segment, because I don't know if that's something that they feel like Kyle Hamilton, they want him to come back for. Again, I would like them to kind of just let him rest for a couple of weeks, because You got and by a couple weeks, I'm saying San Francisco, because if you do lose to San Francisco, it's a non-conference loss. It doesn't have an effect on you. Then you're dealing with the situation. I mean, it has an effect on your overall record, of course. I know that. But in terms of your conference record, it doesn't. But and then you're dealing with a situation where there's injuries on the Jaguars in terms of their quarterback, in terms of they're missing their number one wide receiver. So I think that this is the week that you can kind of just let him rest. And now I get it. I understand that he's very good at what he does. And so replacing Kyle Hamilton is a problem. We noticed that in the Rams game. But my thing is that if you know he's not going to play this week, it allows you to scheme and come up with plans better, because you've had a few days to divulge this, as opposed to losing a guy in game and having to, change everything that you were doing up until that point. Pepe Williams activated?
He was activated to the active roster. We'll see if he plays on Sunday.
Okay.
Wouldn't shock me. I mean, Jalen Armour-Davis has been a healthy scratch quite a few times. Rock Ya-Sin is pretty much fallen out of the rotation as well. So wouldn't shock me if Pepe gets some run, especially if Kyle doesn't play.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So we will see if Kyle will be playing on Sunday. But ultimately, the Jags they're reeling at this point, and we'll see how it goes from there. We'll do our predictions coming up here on Winning Drive. Ravens, Jags, Sunday Night Football. We talked about everything that we needed to on both sides of the ball. The Ravens currently are 3-point favorites away. How do you see this game going? Because I see this, Cordell, as a team that is desperate. They do understand that the Houston Texans are on their heels. And so they're going to have their backs against the wall, essentially, to try to make sure that the Texans do not catch up with them. But ultimately, and look, I think too, if you think about it, the Colts aren't that far behind them as well.
The Colts have the 7th seed right now.
This is very true. So the Colts are actually closer. I keep mentioning the Texans, but actually the Colts are they're both one game behind.
They're both one game behind, right?
They're both one game behind. So they're not one, but two teams. I just did my fingers backwards. If you're watching the YouTube video, I really don't know what just happened to me. Okay, let's try this again. Not one singular, but two teams. I did it right this time. Okay, that was weird. But there's two teams in the AFC South that are on the heels of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So they're pressing. That's how I see this. They need to feel like that they got to come out with a win, and this is a big opponent. We already heard, other teams say, oh, the Ravens are the creme de la creme, so we got to, bring out our best stuff when we play the Ravens, and everybody levels up when they play the number one seed in the AFC. So do you think that the Jags will be leveling up and they squeak out a win here, or do the Ravens leave victorious coming out of Jacksonville on Sunday night?
Yeah, I think the Ravens end up winning this game. The Jags haven't been good at home. It typically does turn out to be a shootout, which can be a little dangerous because in shootouts, you just don't know. You don't know. It could turn out to be a situation of whoever has the ball last type of thing. So the Ravens will have to get stops at some point. You hope that they'll be able to force some turnovers. They've been good about that this year. And you're right, the Jags are going to be desperate. But I think every team that the Ravens are going to face are going to be desperate. It's December football. If you're not a desperate football team at this time of year, then you probably have nothing to play for right now. We saw the Rams play with a high level of desperation in that game as well. So that's the good thing. That's why I kept saying that Rams matchup is about as good of a matchup as the Ravens could ask for coming out of the bye, considering what the rest of their schedule looks like. It gave them a true glimpse of what December football is going to feel like this year. And I think that's going to continue against the Jags. They're going to get the Jags' best shot. You think the Jags are just going to lay down because Christian Kirk isn't there, because Trevor Lawrence is playing on a bum ankle? Say what you want, but Trevor Lawrence being out there is telling you this dude is fighting. They're fighting for their lives right now. He's not out there just to be there. He's out there to try to win. That said, I do think the Ravens win this game. I think that they try to make up for that collapse that they had last year in Jacksonville. I'm pretty sure that'll be fresh on their minds. They'll try to put the game away as best as they can this time. But I do think it gets high scoring. I'll say the Ravens win this game 37-30.
I'm glad that you mentioned last year's game because I definitely think that this is something that they thought about in that collapse game last year. Obviously, a lot has changed since then. The roster for the Ravens is completely different, particularly on offense. Deshaun Jackson was out there catching passes last year. Demarcus Robinson, and this is no disrespect to either one of those guys. Demarcus Robinson obviously caught a touchdown in the Rams game. Deshaun Jackson has decided that he's retiring, so there's that. But look at them now, right? They got their own Zay over there. Then Zay Flowers. They got Odell Beckham Jr. They got Rashad Bateman. I know a lot of people, feel some type of way about Rashad, but I'm confident that he'll find his groove getting back into this offense. Isaiah Likely, has played well enough for us to have the conversation. And again, Nelson Aguilar, who his leadership has definitely been helpful in what it is that he can bring and what he sees out there on the field. So this is a different group that they had last year. Last year's group, I wasn't really confident anyway, but Lamar was out there playing, so you always feel like you have a chance. Well, now Lamar has weapons. That's the difference between this game and last year's game. I definitely think that stung. That loss stung big time because they clearly, were up and then found a way to scrounge. You know what? I'm not using that word. To just the game that gave it away. They gave the game away. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I don't know what's going on with me today. My cognitive skills must be a little bit off, but you know what? I know what I'm saying here. And I'm saying that I think that the Ravens are going to win. And I'm not going to even lie to you, Cordell. I think that this game could be very similar to like a Detroit game or a Seahawks game. I don't think it's going to be that close. I understand we have to respect the Jaguars on paper. I do, because they do have weapons all day. And I think at first it's going to be close. And then at some point, I just think that the Ravens are just going to impose their will on them. So I don't even think it might end up being that close, quite frankly. I'm going to say that the Ravens win this game 34-20. That's what I'm going to say with this. It feels, because every time we feel intimidated by the partner, I'm not saying that we are intimidated by the Jaguars, but what we are respectful of the weapons that they have. And I think that that's a fair assessment, right? We should be. But it feels like every time that we're like, oh, DK Metcalf, oh, the Lions are this, they turn around and just beat those teams down to the ground, right? So now we're coming in like, oh, well, we saw what happened last year. Oh, Zay Jones, Calvin Ridley's there now. He wasn't there last year. What's going on? You know what? Their quarterback is hurt. Their number one wide receiver is hurt. Their secondary ain't that good. Why not? Why not a beatdown? That's what I want to ask you all. Why not a beatdown?
I mean, especially, I know the defense is upset about their last game against the Rams. Absolutely. So, you'd imagine that they're going to come out on fire, kind of similar to the way that they did against the Chargers on Sunday Night Football a couple of weeks ago. It's a primetime game. They don't want to go out there and give up a ton of points. I don't know. I could definitely see it being the way that you're saying, and I could see it being a one-score game. December football, especially when you have two teams that are in the postseason right now that are fighting for seeding. Remember, the Jags are basically fighting for the number one seed themselves right now still. So I just think anything can happen in these types of games. And look, just last year, like we mentioned, we thought that the Ravens were going to go in there and take care of business, and it looked like they would. And then as soon as you get ready to turn the channel, here come the Jaguars storming back. So it's kind of crazy. But I agree with you. I do think it's too much going against the Jags for me to say that they'll beat Baltimore.
I agree with that. So I definitely think, like you said, that this is an angry defense going into that game. They know that they could have played better. I expect them to play better in this week's game. And I expect the offense to kind of get into a rhythm that maybe they've not had. If you feel like that, meaning the Ravens, if they feel like that they have opportunities to throw the ball down the field, we know that they're not going to take that opportunity. We saw numerous times where they wanted to take the opportunity to move the ball downfield. Sometimes a little too soon for my liking. But if they can impose their will down the field, it's a wrap. And that's how I see that. If Lamar is connecting on, let's say if he has 8 downfield passes over 25 yards and they connect on 5, it's over. Yeah, am I saying this and sounding overconfident? Yes, I am. But that's because I believe that that's the one missing piece from this offense, in my opinion, is more connections of passes to past 25 yards down the field. And if he can go over 50% with that, I just don't think that they're going to be stoppable. That's where I stand with that. So
I'll say this as well. I think the Ravens, I mean the Jags, they do have quite a bit of speed on the defensive side of the ball. So
of
I am
course,
curious to see what they decide to do in terms of maybe spying Lamar at times. We know Josh Allen will be rushing, but maybe Aluakon may be a spy guy. He's a sub 4-4 type of speed linebacker. So I would be curious to see how that speed dynamic works between that, that chess match between trying to keep Lamar in the pocket and also preparing for him to take out of the pocket, because I've been saying, and we saw it this past week against the Rams, Lamar's legs are going to be a bigger part of this offense for the remainder of the season, and we saw it Sunday, and I think that's going to continue on.
yeah, I agree with you. So we both see the Ravens winning. Cordell thinks it's a little bit closer. Me, I think it's not. I think that the Ravens are going to say, you know what, we messed up last week. We got to come out here strong and put on a real show for everybody for Sunday Night Football. So that is how we see it. Before we go, I want to shout out my guy Cordell. If you guys listen to any other Ravens podcast, that is great. We definitely love different perspectives, and we've had people from other podcasts on here in previous times. But Cordell is the only guy that is in the castle from your other favorite podcast.
Facts. And Reeta's in there as well on when she has the available time, obviously, and can get through the front gate, because of course we're all scratching and clawing to get to the castle. But yeah, I mean, this is the only podcast where you can listen to that actually has people that are at the castle on a daily basis, around the players, talking to the coaches and stuff like that. So best believe we're giving information that you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, so we appreciate Cordell and what it is that he does, when he can come back and he's able to compile a lot of information. He's able to get the interviews. It does not go unnoticed. So I wanted to shout you out, friend, because you are appreciated, and I'm sure other people appreciate you and your insight and access to the castle as well. So we want to thank you all for listening. Hopefully the Ravens come out victorious. We will be recapping the game next Monday because it is a late game. I gotta sleep. I'm
going to sleep. We going to sleep.
I'm going to sleep. Okay, I don't want to talk. I want to go to sleep. Depending on how it goes, I might need to kind of take it down just a little bit. So we will be talking about this next Monday to follow up the Ravens' hopefully potential win against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We want to thank you all for listening. So from Cordell to me, this is Winning Drive.